All strike forces are ready, and the IDF is prepared for a broad offensive in the north. This is happening while Hezbollah is preparing on the other side, and Prime Minister Netanyahu declares that Trump gave the green light. And further afield, Iran is going up in flames, and attempts to suppress the protests are intensifying as Hezbollah and additional organizations cross the border into Iran, acting as paid mercenaries for the regime to use against their own people who are demanding to take their country back. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. Just before the weekend edition, I'm your host Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. So, the Iranian regime is under pressure for the continuing wave of protests and is threatening to deliver a preemptive blow to all its enemies out of fear of the United States and Israeli military action against it. In order to try and prevent a clash, Israel has reportedly sent a back-channel message to the Ayatollah regime through the Russians that we have no intention of attacking them at this time, but the regime has publicly declared that it does not believe it. They are also saying that they will not allow Israel and America to continue interfering in their protests. Is all of this just posturing, or is it what they actually believe? And will they make a miscalculation, no matter which it is? We might be about to find out pretty soon. For now, the Revolutionary Guards continue to brutalize their own citizens, while hundreds of Shiite militia fighters from Iraq and other mercenaries are being brought in under the cover of a pilgrimage to the city of Mashhad. We will bring you the messages from Israel to Iran and the preparations for a declaration on the demilitarization of southern Lebanon. And speaking of southern Lebanon, following the tension with Hezbollah, Israel's Prime Minister convened a security meeting this week and presented the understandings with which he returned from the meetings with President Trump. The defense establishment is now preparing for action in every arena, some even in parallel, including large-scale preparations for an intense and broad offensive in case the efforts to dismantle Hezbollah do not bear fruit. And at the same time, Hezbollah is moving weapons and is also preparing for fighting against the Israeli air forces. We'll take a look at what's happening on the ground and where things stand. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, against the background of increasing pressure to advance Phase B of the ceasefire plan and the continuation of the diplomatic contacts, the IDF estimates that within weeks, the preparations to establish a new Gaza will be completed. However, both Hamas and the United States understand that Israel will not give up on the return of Ran Gaveli. Hamas renewed the searches for his remains this week under the supervision of the Red Cross, but then we got the reminder that terrorists remain terrorists as Hamas fired at IDF forces in the area where they received authorization to search for the remains. Next, Syria is once again in turmoil as intense battles broke out this week between the regime forces, the Syrian Democratic Forces, after the army declared that neighborhoods under the organization's control as a closed military zone. Clashes also erupted between regime forces and the Kurds in Aleppo, as under El-Julani it seems that most of the ethnic minorities in Syria are under renewed attacks. Once again, terrorists remain terrorists, even if they put on an expensive suit. And finally, there is another arm wrestling match between superpowers here in the Middle East as China inaugurates the largest free trade port in the world, and Washington is furious. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel on day 825 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region acting under the orders of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. Now, I want to call on you to help us spread the truth. You know how to do that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share with a friend, a family member. That's how we do it. Now, we're getting into the news and starting with the hottest, most immediate threat, Hezbollah. In the last 24 hours in southern Lebanon, the IDF once again carried out a targeted strike to eliminate an operative from the organization's Aerial Unit 127 who was involved in rehabilitating military infrastructure. This is already the second terrorist from that same unit eliminated within 2 days, a sharp signal that the game in the north is back to being a real-time game of who rebuilds and who dismantles. And meanwhile, there is now a political military countdown as the Chief of Staff of the Lebanese Armed Forces is expected to announce soon that he has completed the disarmament of Hezbollah south of the Litani River, and alongside that, to present Israel with a clear demand to withdraw from 5 outposts that the IDF still holds inside Lebanon. In Israel, they are already making it clear that this narrative is contradicted by observations and facts on the ground, but simply gives an official stamp to a fairy tale with no connection to reality. It allows the Lebanese National Army to tell the international community that the mission is completed, while on the ground, Hezbollah continues to operate as a full-fledged army. Israel's first response, according to reports, is supposed to be immediate, but not necessarily militarily. It will include a large-scale information campaign inside Lebanon and in the international arena with photos and videos that military intelligence and the Northern Command have collected. And in the materials that Israel plans to present are sites where weapons are stored, as well as Hezbollah staging areas north of the Litani River. The IDF wants to emphasize that Hezbollah took over private homes and turned them into fighting positions and ammunition depots, while the Lebanese army avoided entering them on the grounds that Lebanese law forbids searches inside private homes. In simple words, Lebanon claims that Hezbollah's military capability was dismantled, while Israel claims that they didn't search where the capability is hiding. While arguments continue in the media, the operational plans are already ready, because the IDF assesses that if Lebanon's national army does not dismantle the arrays in practice, Israel will be required to act with force to destroy them itself. On the table is a broad strike plan similar to what it has been doing over the last year, including weapons depots, camps, and headquarters, as well as operatives and commanders. On the technical operational level, this is exactly where Aerial Unit 127 enters the picture, as Hezbollah is trying to restore its aerial layer, including UAVs, observation, and, at times, platforms that undergo conversions to carry more advanced strike capabilities. Meanwhile, the political content adds another layer of pressure. Prime Minister Netanyahu told government ministers this week that President Trump gave Israel a green light for military action in Lebanon. In the same breath, it was reported that the IDF is completing large-scale preparations for an intense and broad offensive if efforts to dismantle Hezbollah do not bear fruit. This is even at the cost of prolonged days of fighting or renewed escalation on the northern border. In other words, this is no longer just an argument over interpretation. It is a clock set to a result test. For their part, Hezbollah is reportedly making their own preparations to go down fighting, moving heavily and long-range weapons to the area north of the Litani River, while the presence south of the river has been significantly reduced. On the one hand, that creates tactical quiet for the IDF, and on the other hand, it keeps Hezbollah's strike capabilities deeper in Lebanese territory, further away from the immediate IDF response. So what do you think about all of this? Should Hezbollah be allowed to get away with moving their weapons north of the Litani River and saying that they did what they were supposed to do under the ceasefire agreement? Or should Israel move quickly to take them down before they're ready to make an offensive move of their own against Israel? Let me know what you think about this in the comment section. And meanwhile, there is a real gap between Lebanon and Israel, because while Lebanon's internationally recognized government wants to make a declaration that it's over, Israel is demanding an end through real dismantling of Hezbollah's capabilities, including weapons that are seized, warehouses that are raided, and infrastructure that is erased. So the question leading us is this: which vision will be realized? Will Israel choose to shatter the illusion with a limited and immediate blow, or will we first see a cognitive and diplomatic battle explode, and only afterwards the real battle? We don't know, but here at TBN Israel, we'll be here to report on everything that's happening next. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, don't forget to press that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we are shifting our focus to the fighting against the Hamas terrorist organization, because at this moment in the northern Gaza Strip, in the area where IDF forces are operating near the Yellow Line, we again hear gunfire coming from armed Hamas cells, exactly in the same area where yesterday Hamas operatives renewed the searches for the last Israeli kidnapped fallen soldiers, his remains, Staff Sergeant Ran Gaveli. The IDF emphasized there are no casualties amongst our forces, but this is a blatant violation of the ceasefire agreement and another sharp reminder that even when Hamas presents searches under supervision and coordination, it remains a terrorist organization that exploits every window of opportunity to test, harass, and strike. And according to the IDF spokesperson's statement, the shooting took place on Wednesday in the Zaytun neighborhood area of Gaza City, which is a dense built-up area near the buffer line and near the border, and this is in view of the forces that are stationed there. In parallel to the shootings, the IDF and the Shin Bet struck a senior terrorist who was advancing terror plots against our forces in the northern parts of Gaza. In some reports, it was said that he is a battalion commander level figure, but at this stage, no official details have been provided about his identity and the results of the strike. However, the IDF emphasizes that the action was carried out based on precise intelligence and a targeted strike, a clear operational message that any attempt to shoot and disappear in the build-up area will be answered with aerial fire and a pinpointed elimination. And furthermore, the events of the last 24 hours do not stand alone. They sum up a week in which the IDF is positioned on the Yellow Line, holding buffer positions and drilling extreme scenarios, while Hamas tries to rebuild control and strengthen in areas where the IDF does not actually control the ground. In the Southern Command, over the last 2 weeks, they sharpened the alertness guidelines and drilled in the outpost scenarios of surprise raids by dozens of terrorists simultaneously, a model of action that Hamas dreams of recreating in order to produce a victory image even under a ceasefire. And within all of this stands the key point of the week, the fallen hostage Ran Gaveli. After a period of stagnation and a halt in the searches that lasted almost a month, Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad renewed a broader and a more significant effort to locate his remains this week, including new points whose locations Israel provided. Ran's parents, Itzik and Talik, said that every minute is an eternity and strengthened the decision of the political echelon not to allow free gifts to Hamas. For instance, the Rafah crossing will not be open until Ran returns home, and the family's headquarters also emphasized that pressure is a necessary tool for a breakthrough. And meanwhile, in the defense establishment, they are now waiting for political approval to open the Rafah crossing as part of the agreement that was signed with Hamas through the mediation of the United States President Donald Trump, and in Israel, they continue logistical preparations for opening in both directions. But the political understandings rest on a clear condition. The crossing will not be open until Gaveli is returned. And in the background, there is also American pressure to move to Phase B of the agreement, and according to political sources, President Trump gave Israel more time, but not forever. In parallel, security sources note that rubble clearing works in Rafah are advancing, with estimates that about 70% of the works have already been completed as part of preparations for what is called Green Rafah and the New Gaza. This is a key part of Phase B, and its completion ahead of schedule is a positive sign for everyone. This is exactly where the operational question hovers over everybody and sharpens, because if Hamas continues to shoot while searches are underway, to build up strength in areas without Israeli control, and to test the Yellow Line day after day, what will the move to Phase B look like in practice? Will it be a diplomatic arrangement with pinpoint enforcement from the air, or will we see a broad ground operation intended to disarm Hamas and close down its operational spaces once more? And here, TBN Israel, we will report everything that's happening from the ground in Israel. And now, let's move to a full report with details about what's happening in Iran, including who's responsible, how the protests are developing, and whether the Revolutionary Guards regime in Iran will go out for an attack against Israel and the United States, or will focus on brutalizing its own citizens. But first, I want to talk to you for just a moment about our partner for today's report, Vinya. Many Israelis from all over this country and all situations in life, they are balancing their life, their reserve duty in the IDF, their family, their work, because when you come home from war and take off the uniform, life doesn't just slow down. I know that feeling. I've come back from reserve duty, trying to be present at home, catch up at work, and still feeling completely drained. So as this new year begins, I made a New Year's resolution, not to do more, but to take better care of my health, so I can actually show up for the people who depend on me. And that's a decision that any of us can make going into the new year. That's why I'm continuing to use Vinya. It's an Israeli supplement made from red grape cells that helps support healthy blood flow to the heart, brain, and muscles. For me, that meant better focus, steadier energy, and fewer days of that foggy feeling or burnt out. I started using Vinya during my IDF reserve duty in Gaza in the winter of 2023, and I'm still taking it today. So if you're thinking about the New Year's resolution that you can actually keep, taking care of your health is a good place to start. You can learn more at vinyatbnisrael.com. Again, that's vinyatbnisrael.com, or call 800-638-1944. And now we're getting back into the news and shifting our focus to Iran. At this moment, in the heart of Tehran, the Grand Bazaar is once again turning into a collision area as shops are closing all at once, crowds are gathering between the alleyways, and Basij forces and the Revolutionary Guards are pushing them out with tear gas and live fire. This is no longer a student protest on the margins, when Iran's main commercial boulevard shuts down and enters the struggle. The regime understands it is losing its grip on the places that keeps it stable for years, and from that moment, it responds like a regime that feels that the ground is slipping out from under its feet. This wave of civil unrest is entering its 12th day, and according to the assessments by the security officials, it is deeper and broader than its predecessors because of anger over the collapse of the economy and the currency as well, and the loss and the defeat in the 12-day war against Israel, and because of a total loss of trust in the regime's discourse with the street. The revolt reorganizes every single night. It spreads to small and to medium-sized cities and penetrates the periphery as well, with especially harsh reports coming from Ilam province, including claims of security forces entering a hospital, clashes with medical teams, and casualties. And at the same time, human rights organizations report dozens of fatalities and more than 1,000 arrests, while other reports already speak of more than 2,000 detainees and hundreds of hotspots all across the country. The regime is doing everything it can to block access to verifiable information, and the internet has gone dark in many parts of the country, but even this information blackout is fueling public rage, as many suspect it's being used to hide larger scales of violence. Within Tehran itself, friction points are moving between commercial centers and sensitive civilian sites, while footage indicates the use of tear gas even near hospitals and shopping centers, and arrests in crowded areas in front of cell phone cameras trying to capture every moment before the internet is cut off. In other cities, the picture is even sharper. In Shiraz, reports emerged of arson in the streets and fire directed at protesters, while in the port city of Bandar Abbas, chants were heard against the leadership and in favor of the return of the Pahlavi dynasty. In various areas, the slogan was also heard that aims straight at the weak point of the Iranian foreign policy: not Gaza, not Lebanon, my life for Iran. This chant represents a rejection of investing resources in proxies while the home front collapses, and I personally want to declare my wholehearted agreement with this sentiment. However, the Ayatollah regime does not appear to be in a hurry to accept this very reasonable demand from the Iranian people. In fact, this week reports have emerged of Shiite militias from Iraq and perhaps also Hezbollah fighters from Lebanon being brought into Iran to assist in suppressing the revolt. Approximately 800 Iraqi military fighters are already being deployed, and according to that information, they are coming via border crossings such as Salmachech, Chazabech, and Khorava under the cover of pilgrimage to the shrine of Imam Raza el-Mashhad, gathering at a base in the Havaz area linked to centers of the government, and from there being sent to different hotspots. Protesters even claimed that they heard Arabic speakers on the ground amongst the suppression forces, a small detail that, from the Iranian streets' perspective, sounds like proof that the regime is actually forced to import power in order to control its people, because the Iranian people are speaking Persian, and the people of Hezbollah in Lebanon speak Arabic. At the same time, the regime is saying to hold two contradictory goals at one time: to repress from inside and to deter from outside. The National Security in Tehran published an unusual statement this week, according to which Iran does not rule out a preemptive response to any possible step by its enemies. This sounds like a threat to a preemptive strike in order to prevent a preemptive strike. The commander of Iran's conventional army, Amir Khatami, went further and warned that the Islamic Republic will not tolerate the continuation of escalation in rhetoric against it, and threatened that if the enemy makes a mistake, the response will be stronger than what was seen in the 12-day war confrontation in June. He also claimed that the readiness of the armed forces is higher than it was before the previous confrontation, and presented the protests as an internal matter that external actors must not interfere in, while the street precisely sees that same internal matter as a struggle over the future of the country. Candidly, I think that this man is bluffing, and I wonder if even he expects to be taken seriously by anyone, or if he's just going through that motions because he knows he has no choice. So tell me what you think about this in the comment section. Keep in mind that the operational knowledge is very important, because when the regime talks about preemptive response, it is signaling that the weapon that it wants to place on the table is the ballistic missile array and the ability to launch salvos towards strategic targets in Israel and also towards American bases in this region. This is exactly the regime's dilemma. It feels that an Israeli preemptive strike on missile infrastructure will inflame the streets even more and shatter the sense of control, and therefore it launched a series of exercises and began speaking the language of a first strike in order to deter Israel. And at the same time, the proxy axis remains a working tool. In reports on Iraq, it was claimed that Iran is even providing the militants there with more advanced means of combat as preparation for the possibility of a new round with Israel, while shifting the regional military center of gravity towards Iraq after losses its forces suffered in Lebanon, in Syria, and in the Gaza Strip. And above all of this hovers the fear of miscalculation, which Israel is trying to mitigate through reassurance messages that are conveyed to the regime via Russia, via America, and via the European intermediaries. The Israeli message is that there is no intention to exploit the protests in order to attack. Whether the regime believes that or not, they felt compelled to respond by saying that they do not believe it. Nevertheless, Israeli officials say that they hope to see something meaningful in the streets of Iran, but are careful not to create expectations or give the regime an excuse to lash out. The Americans, according to the Israeli officials, really like to see the events in Iran, but still do not know whether this is a turning point or a release of steam that the regime is trying to contain. And meanwhile, Iran's president Masoud Pezeshkian tried to contain the anger when he admitted this week that the regime brought the country to its current situation, while also lashing out at the banks for creating inflation, but without presenting a practical plan. The arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro by the United States also raises a huge question mark around about $2 billion that Iran invested there, which now seems unlikely to return. When the real currency is deteriorating, sanctions are tightening, the street is boiling, and the money is stuck overseas, the regime's ability to buy time with force, political bribery, and support for proxies shrinks even more. And so, the question hovering over the entire region is simple and sharp. Will the leadership in Tehran choose in the coming weeks to settle accounts outwards in order to divert fire from the streets, or will the street force it for the first time since 1979 to fight for its very survival at home without the ability to open a major front against Israel? So keep spreading the truth and send this content to as many people as possible. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots in the Ground. And now, we're shifting our focus to Syria, where the El-Julani regime is engaged with Kurdish forces in the city of Aleppo. Humanitarian corridors are opening for hours. Buses are evacuating families, and entire neighborhoods are emptying out under fire. This isn't another local round. This is an arena exploding along a nationwide fault line. After Assad's fall in December 2024, Israel brought forces into the buffer zone in the Golan Heights and closely tracked every shift of power beyond the line. At the same time, it also intervened when it identified a threat to the Druze in southern Syria. From Jerusalem's perspective, this is a hot border, and the concern is not only the well-being of our Kurdish or Druze allies, but a vacuum that can draw extremist cells or quickly slide into an October 7th style incident on the border. In Aleppo, both sides accuse each other of firing into residential areas, while the army calls on civilians to stay away from SDF positions, while the SDF claims a siege and denies reports of a ceasefire. There are fatalities on both sides, and dozens of wounded, while tens of thousands were displaced from the area within days. The airport, schools, and government services have all been disrupted. An agreement from March 10, 2025 was intended to integrate the SDF into state institutions, but it stalled. And the dispute is over control of oil resources and institutions. So, while the Americans are pushing renewed Israeli-Syria security talks, the ideas for a demilitarized zone and a coordination mechanism, Aleppo ignites and reminds everyone how quickly Syria can slide into another internal war. The question that brings the tension back is whether the battle in Aleppo will derail the track towards an arrangement, pushing Israel to tighten its grip on the border even more, or will Damascus and the Kurds close a deal before everything collapses? And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on the subject. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, do not forget that the Middle East is the most unstable region in the world right now. Or maybe the whole world is unstable right now, and somehow Israel is at the center of all of this, and we know why. Therefore, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for wisdom to our leaders. Pray for the IDF soldiers that are defending this country on multiple fronts. Pray for the kids of this land. Pray for all the innocent lives around this region, if it's the people of the Gaza Strip, people of Lebanon, people of Syria, people of Iran. Let's pray for the people of Iran and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.